So I am going to start out by telling you just a little bit about our organisation, who we are and what we do. I'm going to then cover some of the key learnings that we have found through our resettlement work. Then I'm going to highlight some of the approaches that have worked best. I'll give you some practical examples of good practice. And then we're going to identify some of the gaps that we perceive on the ground in our day-to-day work around the resettlement of refugee children. And then finally, I'll finish up with some suggestions for policy or practice, which really is just an opportunity for us to do things a little bit better. So, Okay, so our organisation is called LUIMNÍ. DORAS is the Irish word for door, and the idea is that we're an organisation that is an open door in welcome to newcomers to Limerick. It's also an acronym for Development Organisation for Refugees and Asylum Seekers, and we were established in the year 2000 when the direct provision system was initially put into place. A group of people got together to establish the organisation just before the first asylum seekers were dispersed to Limerick. And our vision is for a society where equality and respect for the human rights of all migrants are realised. So we have three core pillars of work. The first one is around direct support, and when we say direct, we mean working directly with individuals. So we have an advice centre, a drop-in centre, where we provide immigration-specific advice and information to a little over 1,200 migrants per year. That's based in Limerick. We have been putting quite a bit of our resources over the last while into supporting residents of direct provision to transition out of direct provision and into the community. We also do regular outreach to the 3 direct provision centres that are located near Limerick. And finally, which is relevant, I guess, for today, our refugee resettlement work. So we undertook a resettlement project in Portlaoise in 2015 with some 56 Syrian and Iraqi refugees. Then in Limerick in 2017, and we're currently delivering a project in Wexford where there are just over 200 refugees, and we're doing that through Wexford County Council. Then the next pillar of our work is around integration planning and intercultural cities. These are more strategic level operations that we deliver in conjunction with the mostly statutory but also some non-statutory in Limerick. It might be of interest to know that Limerick is the second intercultural city in Ireland, designated through the Council of Europe, and that is second to Dublin. Then finally, advocacy and campaigning. So we do, I guess our core work really is the direct one-to-one support, but we encounter, or I guess we get to experience a lot of the issues that the people that we work with encounter on the ground. And we, take that as an evidence base then to advocate and campaign for change in policy and practice at a national level. So, for example, we have been campaigning for an end to direct provision for a little over 10 years now. Okay, so then if we're looking at some of the key learnings from our experience on the ground, the first one is around education. So we have seen, for example, that many of the children who are coming into Ireland through resettlement have missed a significant amount of time in school. So that obviously is problematic. It becomes particularly difficult for children at senior or at secondary level, where they have missed maybe 4, 5, 6 years of schooling and find that they really have missed out on a huge amount of their education. There are some statistics there stating that half of the Syrian-aged children in Lebanon don't attend any schooling, so that becomes an issue. We have certainly seen in the areas that we've worked in where children are subjected to bullying and discrimination. That really comes from a misunderstanding of who they are and why they're here. A lot of the kind of classic rumours come out in the school and are directed towards the refugee children who have arrived there. We've also seen quite a bit of anticipation from the schools, and this is, I suppose, something that could possibly be avoided if schools were given a little bit more support and a little bit more time to prepare and understand the implications of having refugee children in their schools. We find that we spend quite a bit of time supporting the teachers and the support workers, home liaison officers, if there are, in addressing issues that arrive, and quite a bit of that has to do with their confidence of engaging with this group. Then, of course, English is an issue, and a lot of the schools have low levels of ESOL and possibly not sufficient learning supports for children who obviously don't speak the language, and that issue is then compounded by the fact that they may not have been to school for a number of years. We have found that in instances where the teachers are very proactive and take a particular interest and reach out and engage with the children and their parents, that helps the children and the parents to settle in to the education system more easily. School expenses is an issue. I know that's a broader issue, but it does cause quite a level of stress and anxiety for the families that we've been working with. For example, one of the schools in Wexford insist that all of the children have an iPad, which has a significant expense. However, they don't provide for that. So we did manage to secure an iPad through donation for that particular child, but it does add to the anxiety and the stress. Then around the awareness raising of the school system, this is where parents are not familiar with the legislation, where children need to be at school. They're not familiar with the system of averting the school if a child is going to be late or if the child is not going to show up at all. So we found ways of developing some material in Arabic, making that available to the parents, and having TUSLA deliver information sessions directly with the parents. Then the final point there is around the extracurricular activities, and we've certainly found that getting children involved in anything from sport, dance, even participating in a homework club has really helped them to settle in and feel at home much quicker. So then some of the learnings around health. So we have certainly seen psychosocial issues presenting. For the kids, there's bedwetting, nightmares, there's a fear of being alone. A recent study from Save the Children stated that 70% of children interviewed, Syrian children interviewed, were showing signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. This, I suppose, is definitely an issue that we're seeing in the kids. Trying to access appropriate services is difficult. The parents don't understand what's available. The parents are reluctant to maybe to recognise that their child has a psychological issue. So there's a stigma around that too, that takes quite a bit of cajoling maybe to get the families to understand that it is normal, it is to be expected, and that there are supports available around this. The dental issues have been major issues for children. Again, if they have spent a number of years in a refugee camp, their teeth have often been neglected. The dental services that are available are through the medical card, so they are quite limited. So we see children being presented with, significant bills around dental treatment, and again, that causes its own stress. We have worked with a couple of dentists in Limerick where we've approached them directly. In fact, the dentists of staff have gone to them and explained the situation. We have been able to get some pro bono work, which is great. And then the frustration with the medical system, this we see quite regularly. People just don't really believe us when we say that there is, maybe an 8-month waiting list for a child to see a psychologist, or that the treatment they need is not available under their medical card. Okay, so what has worked well? We have definitely found that homework groups have worked very well. We had a homework group in Newcastle West where there were 6 resettled families. We've managed to continue that homework club through a grant from the Community Integration Fund, and the families have really, really benefited from this. The volunteers who run the club have also, I guess, really embraced the families and have provided all sorts of other supports beyond the homework club. This family volunteers, so we initially set up a system in Portlaoise of family advocates, and that was, I guess, in anticipation of us leaving Portlaoise. So generally resettlement programs are foreseen for kind of 12 to 18 months. So once we were coming towards the end of our time in Portlaoise, we put in this family advocate system where volunteers are trained, vetted and supported by us, then introduced to families. And the idea is that they build up a relationship and they are there to help when the help is needed. That's also a good way. We find in all the areas we've worked that the local community people do want to get involved when they hear that refugees are coming to the area. They do want to be proactive and reach out. So this is a very good way of channeling those volunteers. The homeschool liaison, when that works well between the school and the families, that works really well. So we found that that's helped children to settle in. It's helped the parents to understand the responsibilities that they have. This buddy system in schools we've also found has worked really well for at least the first couple of months, where the teachers work with us to identify one person who might buddy up with the new refugee child and just sit with them on the first day, show them where the bathroom is, be with them in the playground for the first while, and that has led to great friendships blossoming and really eased the anxiety for the children going into the school. We also have developed through the Intercultural Cities work actually this anti-rumours materials, and there's one example here. They are all available on our website and you're welcome to use them. So one of the things that we do is we do a little bit of training with with anybody who'll accept it. So with the schools, with the community development organisations, with the ETB and others who are going to be engaging with the families and the children around the most common rumours that come up. So you've probably all heard people say they couldn't really be a refugee if they've got mobile phone, if they've got smartphones. So this one is particularly addressing that rumour and getting people to think, I know personally I hardly, go to bed without my smartphone beside me, so if I was leaving home I certainly wouldn't be leaving that behind. The mainstream summer activities, so within the programme of the resettlement programme, there is a budget set aside to help or to cover children participating in summer Halloween, Easter activities, and we found that worked really, really well at a certain point in time. I think we certainly found that if it happens too early, it can be difficult for the children, but if they have been there for maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 months, for them to participate in a summer camp or a Halloween camp is really beneficial to them. The community events where again, in the kind of initial stages, in the first 12 to 18 months, we would organise events. We might organise a shared food event or a picnic, in the summer, where the refugees and wider community are getting an opportunity to get to know each other. For those type of events, we found it really gets the children exercised and excited to be part of that. So if we ask them to sing or to dance or to do whatever their little party piece is, that really seems to get them interested. And then the last point there is around information sessions for parents around the school system, as well as the child protection legislation, which they generally are not too familiar with. So we're moving on to further examples of good practice. Linking people with local youth groups. We have definitely found that this has worked incredibly well in Limerick. The youth service in Limerick are very proactive about including migrant children in general in their services, and they really embraced the refugee children that were arriving. We have found that there are awkwardness is the word that's coming to my mind around teenagers who find themselves in a situation where they may have been, we've had a couple of situations where a teenage male has been the head of the household and has been, seen as the head of the household in their time in refugee camps, and then they arrive here and all of a sudden they're being, treated like a 14-year-old is treated here. So it's really important to be, I suppose, cognizant of their needs and work with the local community, the local youth groups. And I think Sally's going to be covering a little bit more of that just after I've finished. Again, the community development groups have generally been enthusiastic about getting involved and proactive about getting involved. So working with them to deliver after schools program, ESOL, whatever it is that they feel they want to do, has worked really well. That's also particularly important for the kind of what we call sustainability. So once the program is finished, that the local community groups have taken on some of the integration work. And then finally, linking children with the after schools activities. I mentioned that earlier, and that has certainly been successful. The school's cultural awareness and using intercultural resources, that leads back to when I was saying earlier how some of the schools have struggled with just feeling uncertain how they were going to work with the children and the families, and this, delivering that training, giving them a space to explore what issues they feel they may have to or they feel they may encounter, gives them more confidence than once the children have arrived. Getting the schools to do things like intercultural days, celebrating World Refugee Day, Social Inclusion Week, these all help the school to have a greater understanding of diversity and the children to feel more welcome and more at home. The local libraries, I know in Wexford the local library have been really enthusiastic and very proactive, putting on lots of events to get the children and the families involved. So then maybe just to highlight a couple of the gaps which have been pretty much covered earlier, but in my earlier slides, but just to highlight them here together. So the first one is around the mental health supports, and I mentioned that it is a tricky area. There is certainly a cultural reticence. There is a good practice in Wexford where there's a part-time mental health nurse dedicated to work with the families there. And the fact that she is on the ground and there and participating in these activities, developing some of the activities, getting to know the individuals, the families, the children themselves, has really helped them to trust her and take her guidance around accessing mental health supports. The dental is definitely a major issue in refugee children and refugee adults, but it's particularly acute with the children. We would see that there is maybe a need for more tools to promote understanding and the issues around refugee children in schools and for frontline staff. We would suggest that there would be maybe a national coordinated tool delivered or developed for schools to access in this particular area. And then we were also suggesting that for an optimum result, I guess, around the integration of refugee children, that there would be a specifically dedicated child development or child integration person attached to refugee resettlement programs, where they're really focusing on the well, very much taking it from the child-centred approach. They're really focusing on the child and the child's needs. So we also have observed that there are cultural and orientation sessions delivered to refugees when they're in the emergency reception and orientation centres. And we see that the families really, even though they've participated and it has taken place, they really haven't absorbed any of the, or much of the information by the time they get to us, say, by the time they get to the town that they're going to be resettled in. So it is probably a little bit of a information overload at that point when they're, learning a lot of things about Ireland. They're finding out where they're going, they're signing up for their medical card, they're doing quite a bit of stuff. So we would suggest that that should take place a little bit later, just after people arrive in their resettled towns and homes. So the other thing that we would certainly recommend is around a system of independent and external evaluations. There is a huge amount of learning on the ground. There have now been a certain number of resettlement projects which have been completed, and the experiences and the outcomes from, as far as we know, have been quite different in different places. So we think it would be really interesting to do an external evaluation of all of the resettlement projects that have taken place to date. And then we certainly would be suggesting that there should be more opportunities for sharing. So we have certainly seen that resettlement workers do find that they are very much left to their own devices. We've had a number of resettlement workers tell us that they don't want to work in this area anymore, that it's, that they feel very unsupported, and they just felt very unsupported. So that, that experience and that learning is then lost to refugee resettlement, and that's a real pity. Okay, so finally, this is actually just very much a recap of what I've just been saying. So we were saying around the ESOL supports. We know that in the UK, each school that takes refugee children gets an additional fund of £4,000 to put in place the extra resources that are needed. I'm not aware that that happens here, and we would certainly be advocating for that. I mentioned earlier about an intercultural toolkit that would be very useful for schools. The medical screening, this is something that should be prioritised. The dental issues I spoke about earlier, and we would be suggesting or requesting that the medical card would be extended to include those specific things like the dental care for an initial period of time when people arrive. I already mentioned the child-centred integration worker, and then finally we would be reiterating the call for external evaluations. And that is it. Thank you very much.